Hello, I hope everyone's doing well this afternoon. This is the ADI Books Deeper Dive. We're doing physical science today. I'm Krista Sampson. I am moderating the webinar, and I am here with Vic Sampson, who is presenting, and I will let him take it away.
So on this one, we're doing a deeper dive into physical science. So our physical science book is especially aligned with the NGSS. In there, there's 8 investigations. There's the table of contents that you can see there. So each one of those are aligned with a performance expectation from the NGSS. That said, we also have physical science investigations in all of our middle school Texas books. So 6th grade, there's 3 physical science investigations for 6th grade. There's 3 more in 7th grade and another 3 in 8th grade. So the reason why these are organized like this is because for Texas, we have standards that do physical, earth, and life science in each grade instead of treating them as a life science or physical. So we had to make different books on that. So you'll see different investigations in each of those books on that. For today, I thought we would do one that is kind of a cool topic that often is hard to teach, and that's the idea of waves. So we're going to look at surf lakes in Australia as an example of a physical science investigation for middle school. So we're going to get this started. So all of our investigations, we have handouts that are in the books. They're also available for download in our Learning Hub. And all of these start off the same way. So we start with a phenomenon that we introduce right off the bat of something that the kids are going to watch and then need to explain. We introduce the task, what they're going to be explaining in there, and then we elicit their ideas about that by having them draw initial models. They share those models with their team, and then they generate questions based on kind of gaps in understanding. So they start saying things, well, I think this is what happens, or this is what happens, I think, but I'm not sure. That then creates a need for them to learn all of the content that are tied to their standards. That are tied to the standards that they need to learn for that subject or grade. As I mentioned, the Learning Hub is a great resource for you as a teacher using these books. So what we did in there is each book then comes with a book code. So when you go to the Learning Hub, which is adilearninghub.com, you can create an absolutely free teacher account. It's your name and your email. That gives you a free account. And then it'll ask you for a book code. So once you enter your book code from the book you got, it then populates your library in there with all the investigations from that book. So for example, and then when you click on any of those investigations, there's a presentation. There's a button that allows you to download all the handouts so you can print those out instead of copying straight out of the book. Or you can use the presentation mode, which acts as your slide deck for moving through the investigation. I know when I'm always teaching, I like to have kind of a guidance slide deck going on that's got the questions and the images so we can keep everybody on the same page as we move. We made that for you with this. So here's a picture of what that looks like. It goes to full screen. So basically, you can just go to stage 1, activity 1, hit full screen. It's all there for you. It has the same text that's on the handout, but it also has all the videos and images that you need. So let me show you the video from this investigation. Kind of cool. So from there, we ask them things that they notice about that, and they'll start talking about the waves moving and the patterns that they see. And then we introduce the idea of, well, how could you go, the people that make this machine, how could they make either bigger or smaller waves, or have them different distance, or affect the timing of when the waves are breaking on the beach, right? So then they draw the model of that, of what they think is happening. Then they start identifying those new questions as we go through that. Oh, there's the task that we were talking about there. Then we move right into the idea stage. So then we introduce some of the content that they're expected to know in the standards, but now they're using it as pieces of a puzzle to make sense of what's going on in that phenomenon. So we first introduce the idea of just what is a wave, right? This idea that it's a disturbance that travels through a medium. So they can kind of talk through that piece. And then we can start talking about how we describe the various properties of waves: crests, troughs, wavelengths, amplitude, those different kinds of pieces, period and frequency. So they have those ideas. Now they can talk about how what a wave is and how it's different. One wave is different from another. And then we introduce the idea of using models to investigate phenomenon, right? Which is one of the big practices in science, and also as well as thinking about systems and models of systems as a cross-cutting concept. So we kind of introduce that some models can be computer-based. You can think about systems in terms of inputs and outputs, and then also talking about the limited precision and reliability of all models. What we usually do is recommend, like when I'm teaching one of these, especially the first time, I'll read this out loud and have students follow along. As they're doing that, I might point out some things like, "Ooh, that might be interesting," or "that might be useful," as we're moving through. And then I have groups of students kind of talk through that of what they think is the most useful ideas in small groups. They share out. We can record kind of a common thing on the board as a way to kind of keep a record of all of our thinking about useful ideas. Once again, in Learning Hub in the presentation mode, we include all of this text so you can put it up on the screen. That's how you can read it out loud really easily if you want to. But more importantly, we have all of the images embedded in there, where if you click on them, they are blown up, enlarged. So you can see them in color and really easy to see. So you can bring those images up really easily and talk through them, which is really helpful for helping them understand the concepts and the content that's going on in there. So often when we were using handouts or other print materials, you can't really see that stuff. So we wanted to make sure that there is an opportunity to be able to use that as a tool for comprehension in the investigations. Okay, so now they've got some ideas that they can work with, and they've got the bigger question. What you want to do is move on to the plan stage. And the first thing you want to do in the plan stage is kind of introduce the tools that they're going to be using. So in this investigation, they're going to be using a simulation to measure changes in characteristics of waves after you change drop sizes or frequency and things like that. So what we do is you can talk them through this simulation and how it works. We have one embedded in the Learning Hub. Did I add an image of that? Nope. You can add, it's embedded in the Learning Hub, so you can bring that full screen in the presentation mode, and then you can click through them and show them what you can do. Like, I wouldn't tell them exactly how to carry out their investigation, just show them how the tool works. Once they know how the tool works, then you can have them work in their small groups to plan out their investigation. We include graphic organizers on their handouts to get them to help them, encourage them to think about certain things. In this case, what's your question? What's observations or measurements you need? How are you going to analyze those once you get them? Great formative assessment there. You can check in with each group and have them talk about what they're thinking, look at what they're doing. If you're happy with their plan, sign off on it. If you want them to change anything, they can make that change before you sign off on it. It keeps everybody kind of moving through at a good pace, and you know exactly what they're doing. So once they have that, they can then access these simulations. This one happens to be at the PhET website, so they're free. You're just able to go access that. In Learning Hub, we add URLs so they can just type that into their device, whatever they're using during class, and they can bring this up and start using the simulation and carry out their plan that they've got. While they're working on their plan, they've got handouts that they can use to collect data. So what data they think is most important, write down their observations and measurements, and then go through the process of making sense of your data, right? So if you collect this, then you have to analyze it and interpret that analysis to make sense of it. So you might show differences between conditions or differences between groups or relationship over time, or maybe a relationship between variables. And kids often do that using kind of graphical representations, but you can use that through pictures or any other way they do. We just provide a space for them to start thinking through that. At the end of this stage, they then should have an answer to the guiding question. So we have each group now share what they figured out in the form of an argument, right? So the argument is what they figured out, their claim they're making, their answer to their guiding question, plus their evidence and their justification for that. We recommend that students do these on whiteboards, so they almost look like posters, like if you were at a conference, like a science conference, because they're easy to read and you can make changes to them. So the kids put up make their arguments on whiteboards, then they can share them with other groups, get feedback, ways to improve, and then come back at the end of this stage and make any changes they want to make their argument better based on that feedback and those interactions. On their handouts, we include a spot so they can keep notes as they're going around, because you might be a student that's away from your group giving other people feedback, but you might see a good idea, write that down. Or if you're presenting your argument to other groups, they may give you a suggestion, great thing to write down. Then you can kind of keep track of all of those theirs as you're going through. At the end of this stage, everyone should be on the same page of what they figured out. The other thing I forgot to mention is in Learning Hub, we also include extra scaffolds for this, right? So the handouts will show some information, but if kids are struggling to figure out, well, what's evidence? What does justification mean? We add these extra pieces in there that you can show as well to give a little extra scaffolding if you need it. Don't have to show it if you don't want to. So after they figured out and finalized their argument, what we want to do is move into the reflect stage of an ADI, which is giving students an opportunity to talk about what they've learned about the content and also the practices of science. So in this case, the content they need to know are the characteristics of waves, right? So how do you tell the difference between two different waves? How would you describe those? So to do that, what we recommend doing is putting an image, something like this, that doesn't explain all that, but gives a prompt to talk about. So you might put this image up there on the screen and then say, okay, using what you know about waves and the characteristics of waves, how can you describe wave 1 and wave 2? Like, how can you tell them that they're different? Talk that over in your groups. Each group shares out. If there's any misconceptions or anything that pop up, you can reteach at that point. So it's just one final check-in point. After you talk about the content, then you can talk a little bit about the how they engage in the practices, right? So how do they plan and carry out investigations? How do they engage in argument from evidence? How do they communicate information? So to do that, we recommend prompting them with these questions. One, what you do during your investigation made it scientific, right? So they'll talk about all the good things that happen. Then what could you have done differently? This is where they start to admit the things that they made mistakes on, which is 100% fine. These don't need to be perfect. They are learning from their mistakes. Because they're learning from those mistakes, they got to identify those. And then as a class, you can come up with some rules or things that we need to always keep in mind when we're carrying out investigations. What's really powerful about this is students will start realizing why you do multiple trials, or why you use units, or you have to consider precision, or what's the best way to display evidence, or what makes some evidence stronger than other evidence, kind of thing. So it's a really great way to learn how to engage in the practice of science by just kind of reflecting on the mistakes that you made and making a plan for moving forward. We also include a handout for that discussion. One of the things that are really great about taking notes, I think, is if you're more reflective about it. So after you've heard something and talked about something, what is the things that you think is most important to remember for next time? So we add a spot for them so they can write those ideas about either the content or the practices of things that they think they need to remember that will be useful in the future. you can have them revisit these multiple times. It's a great like kind of progress of how they're thinking about stuff. Last stage, we asked them to write up individually write up what they learned during the investigation in the form of a report. That basically has 3 sections: an intro, a method, and an argument. The introduction is just what were you trying to figure out? What's your question? What was the phenomenon? Your method is just what did you do? Because everybody had their own choice in that, so that makes sense to explain what they did. And then their argument is what their answer, the guiding question is, and their evidence in support of it. This basically comes from their whiteboard that they made with their group. The whiteboard's usually a lot of chicken scratch and little drawings and things like that. So now they have to kind of formalize that. And by formalizing it, it makes them think about the content in deeper ways. From there, so each student writes a draft report. From there, we have them go through a peer review. The way we recommend doing this is in groups of 3. So if you say you have a class of 30 students, you would form 10 groups of 3, right? And they can be different groups from what they were doing in the investigation, or the same, doesn't really matter. But put them in groups of 3. You collect everybody's draft reports. So you have 30 draft reports. Then you give each group a report written by somebody outside their group and 1 peer review guide. So you've given out 10 reports, 10 peer review guides. Then you give each group 15 minutes. I usually set a timer to review the report. And to do that, they just go through this peer review guide, and each of the questions are tied to a section, and then also writing mechanics. And they go through each of these questions, and if they can say yes, it's great, you don't have to touch it. If they have to go no or somewhat, then they have to give feedback on how to improve it. So they get 15 minutes to do that. At the end of 15 minutes, you go through and collect everybody, the peer review and the report that's been reviewed. Then each group gets a new report and a new peer review guide, another 15 minutes. After that 15 minutes, collect those. 1 last report, 1 last peer review guide. So what ends up happening is every group reviews 3 different reports, and each person in the class has had their report reviewed by a group of 3. So it's really a great way to help students learn how to write and clarify any content issues or anything like that as they're discussing about what counts. From there, you return the reports and the peer review guides to the individual students. They can do a final copy. You can have them do it by handwritten. You can have them type it. You can use the sentence starters. Again, you don't have to. Whatever you want to do is best on the needs of your students. Once they're done with that, they can turn in their first draft, their final draft, and that peer review guide that was filled out. And then you can use the exact same guide as a rubric, scoring each kind of element, each of those questions on a scale of 0 to 3, with 0 being missing, 1 being approaching your expectations, 2 that meets, so full credit, and then 3, they did something that you're like, wow, that's really fantastic. So you can use that as a way to do that, and you can provide comments and things as well. So it's a really nice assessment of student learning. Now, when you're looking at these investigations, that's a lot there. So you might be wondering, well, how am I going to remember how to do all of that stuff just from the handouts? Don't worry, we've got lesson plans all set up. So each of the investigations have a very detailed set of lesson plans. So this is one for the Surf Lakes in Australia investigation. Comes with an overview, which is the description, the guiding question, what they're going to figure out. It has a graphic that tells you how you can break the stages and the activities in these over multiple days, right? So we're assuming usually 50-minute periods. So you can think of you can do stage 1 and stage 2 on the first day, right? Because that's 50 minutes. The second day you can do stage 2 or stage 2 and 3 on that, or 3 and 4, I mean. So it tells you how you can break that up. It's got all of your standards, performance expectations, all those broken out, WIDA language development standards, Common Core for English Language Arts for the NGSS books. If you're in Texas, these are all broken down by ELPS and English Language Arts standards, and then the practice, recurring themes, and disciplinary content in our new TEKS. We always include things to know before starting the lesson. So this is the information that you would talk about during that reflective discussion, and it's also what's found in the ideas. So you can kind of get a reference of like, where's the big ideas that kids need to know from this. We include materials, images of how to use this. If it's a simulation, images of that, how do you use the simulation, what all the buttons do. If it's hands-on, we talk about how you actually set it up with pictures and all of those kinds of things and how you handle cleanup. And then finally, we include detailed directions for each of the activities within the stage. So this is a activity A and B from the task stage. And you can see what the activity is called, how long it should take, how you should group, what to do, what to give out to the students in terms of handouts, what to show on a screen. We include teaching tips from management, and then the attending to equity is extra recommendations for supporting students with special needs or who are learning a second language or a third language. Those students who are reading below grade level, who need some extra support, all of those are in there that are basically just some things that you can do that we have found that are useful, that are beyond what's already built into the investigation already. So with that, we've got a few minutes left. We got about 10 minutes or so. Any questions that I can answer? Once again, you can type them in the Q&A, or you can hit the raise your hand button if you just like to talk through anything.
So Eric asks, my students struggle with writing explanations. How do you support them during this stage?
Oh, awesome. So one of the hardest things for students, like I said before, is kind of the blank page. So the hardest part is to kind of take an explanation out of nowhere where you haven't been grappling with it. So a lot of what we do builds up into that, right? So when you've got the phenomenon, you're making sense of something. When you have the ideas, that's the content you're pulling in. Then you have done something hands-on. Then you've also developed an argument that includes an explanation. You've talked about those, shared those, refined those, and then we've discussed it. Then from there, all of that goes into, then you can individually start making that. And that's where that report comes in. We have the sentence starters to get them started, right? So if there's the first time doing it, those sentence starters make it a lot easier to move into. But it's really then the reviewing of each other's work. So often what we do in school is we give kind of kids one chance to do stuff. So turn in your explanation or turn in your argument. In this case, they put down something, right, to get started of what they're thinking, and then they spend time reviewing. And as they go through each of those criteria and they start talking and looking what other people do, you'll start hearing students go, oh, now I get it. And that's where it clicks of what needs to be included in an explanation or into an argument, or what makes writing clear versus not so clear. And then they have a opportunity to change everything without having a grade related penalty. So by going through this process, especially the peer review, they get really amazing at writing these things. Not to say that the first one's not great, but by the end of the year, amazing.
Perfect. And Jose has a question in the teacher notes, the things to know. Is that just for the teacher, or is this something that students should know before he starts the investigation with his class?
No, that's the kind of the cool thing about the way these things are done. So those teacher notes are designed for you of kind of like, okay, this is kind of my foundation as I'm getting ready. It almost that information almost mirrors what's in the idea stage, or pretty similar onto that. So what we try to do is, instead of students discovering everything, what they're trying to do is explain a phenomenon using these ideas. So we introduce these ideas as pieces of the puzzle so they can start grappling with them earlier in the investigation. And so when it comes to these kids, we don't assume kids know anything about the content when they move into this investigation. So it's all built so they learn by doing the investigation.
Perfect. I think that's it for questions. And I think you have.
Yep, just some reminders of what's coming up. So this is our last deep dive of this week. Next Monday on the 21st, we will be doing the Earth and Space for middle school. And then at 4:30, we're going to start moving to high school. So we're going to do high school Earth and Space, look at that content, and then we'll continue on with the chemistry and biology on those deeper dives. So love for you to join us for any of these to kind of see more of the investigations.
All right. Thanks all, and have a wonderful evening.